Mm. Good evening, everyone. I hope you are doing well. This is Steph Love coming at you with another episode of Maybe I'm Rambling. I'm so excited for my next guest. And usually I would introduce people, but this person does so much that I am strictly going to say his name and then let him tell you about himself. He's an incredible guy. I think you're going to learn a lot tonight. So everyone, please welcome Anthony Disson to the podcast. All right.
Awesome.
So, sir, before you run down your laundry list of accomplishments and the way you impact this community, are you sticking with me tonight? Are you
All right,
drinking?
so I am profoundly boring. I got my steady 40-ounce bottle from Costco of water, so that's how fun of a party guest I am.
But you know what? Everybody needs a designated driver, right? And we
And
all
that
need
is
to be
me.
reminded to hydrate. So I
That is the
have
gift I'm given.
right. I have my wine. I'm actually drinking a New Jersey based wine at Tomasello Winery, the Peach Moscato. I don't usually drink from there, but the bottle was pretty, so I got it.
It's
But
good in
I
the
do
freezer.
have
I
my
love
high
it.
quality H2O next to it.
See, all right, so we're good on
Yes, we're there.
that.
We're there. So Anthony, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself and all that you do?
Sure. Oh my. All right. So I'll keep this short. I am a registered dietitian.
Mhm.
I started off my career as an outpatient and community ed dietitian. I used to work at Princeton Medical Center way back when. And then I left there to actually work for something that Whole Foods created called the Wellness Club, which was a
Mm.
plant-based nutrition education program, which was so awesome and fantastic and impactful. But after 2 years, they decided to stop funding it, so that stopped.
Oh, okay, that's I don't
And
know.
then yeah, which was such a bummer, but it was such a cool time. And then I got hired by Centrastate Medical Center in Freehold, where I used to do a program every summer called the Plant Powered Program, which is like a 10-week plant-based nutrition education program.
Okay.
And then during that, I started to adjunct and had the great opportunity to be brought on full time as a professor in the School of Health Sciences at Stockton, which is kind of my full time gig now.
Okay.
And then the other great work I get to do is I'm the vice president of nutrition for something called Well Start Health, which is a plant based lifestyle medicine online, like telemedicine program, where we
Ooh,
coach people and teach people how to live a more healthy lifestyle through plant based nutrition and just fitness and mindfulness and those sorts of things.
yeah, yeah, and see, I knew you did a lot with plant-based foods and diets because that's how we connected, but I did not know all of that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
thank you. That's why I said you have to introduce yourself because I would have missed some of that. Um, so Anthony and I we are in the same cohort for our doctoral program in organizational leadership. So that's how we met. And you ever just kind of meet someone and you make eye contact and you're like, we're probably going to get along, and that's kind of how we connected in class. But learning about Anthony's background, I actually came to him for some assistance, and he offered. Back in 2017, the end of 2017, I had major surgery. I had a hysterectomy, and anybody who's ever had a major surgery, that throws off so much chemical imbalance and your metabolism, and it takes a while for things to kind of get back to normal. And I started seeing an excessive weight gain. And so I was like, listen, I don't eat a lot, I don't drink a lot, contrary to me sipping every Tuesday. But what is happening? And so we were really able to sit down and talk about my diet. And so since working with Anthony, I've definitely started dropping some pounds. My plant-based diet looks different. So I'm thankful for him. And that's why I wanted to bring him into the space tonight to talk about like being vegan. And I think when we say that, it scares the crap out of people because they're like, you just want me to eat carrots all day? And it's right, like, so can you just kind of talk about what does it look like to be vegan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I myself went vegan back in the summer of 2002. So this is my 18th year being vegan now. And I know which changed the whole, my whole trajectory of life was completely different. What I thought I was going to be doing before I went vegan compared to after. So that's been a cool thing. But the reason why, especially in recent years, I've been loving the word plant-based a bit more than vegan, as
Okay.
much as I think both are important and good. I think so often with vegan and a little bit vegetarian, but especially vegan, people think of it as the no diet, right? It's no dairy, no eggs, no meat. Like it automatically has that restrictive, denial, missing kind of quality to it. Where
Mhm.
what I like about plant based, when I think other people are liking about plant based, is it's more about a positive spin on, well, I'm basing my diet on plant based foods.
Okay.
And so for some people, that's just a big chunk of what they eat, but they still eat other stuff from animal sources. They might restrict that, or they might be what some people call plant perfect, but I don't like that word perfect. So just, you might think of it as a completely vegan plant-based diet or whatever. But
Mhm.
just the sense of that you are making more and more and more of your plate something that's a vegetable, a fruit, grain, bean, nut, seed, something like that. And that animal foods, which in most cultures around the world already are plant-based, and that they're seen as condiments, they're seen as dishes you only eat on religious holidays, they're seen as flavoring. So it's automatically not looking at meat or chicken or something like that as the star. But
Mhm.
as countries get more and more wealthy and try to westernize and look like Western kind of plates, they start to move away from that traditional way of eating. And so, for a lot of people, when they go vegan or plant based, often there is this sense of returning to the roots of whatever their cultural background is, of sort of pre westernization of what their plates would have looked like already.
Mhm. Oh wow. Okay. And so there's so much there that I had no clue about.
Oh, yeah.
And so you talked about the difference between plant-based and vegan, but a
Hmm.
lot of things that I see in these vegan Facebook groups that I'm a part of, and we'll jump on that in a second, is like raw vegan. And
Yeah.
to me, I'm like, aren't you hungry? Don't you miss something hot? And so I don't necessarily understand what raw veganism is.
So, like most, normal freshmen in college, I spent my spring break in college at a woman's house in Pennsylvania who had this like under the table countercultural raw vegan retreat center. Like most people, like
Okay.
like everyone does their freshman year spring break.
Yeah.
And so that was like my that was my first real introduction to raw food veganism, and I left there really impacted by, I don't think this is the way people are supposed to eat,
Okay.
for that exact thing of one of the great one of the things that has been thought as to why humans started to become so intelligent and start to adapt to their environment so well is that we started to cook our food. Because when you cook food, whether it's a plant or an animal, but especially plants, you liberate so much more nutrition from them. When you don't, because those fibers are hard to digest, we don't have a rumen in our gut, so we can't ferment and break down these fibers for energy the way that a cow does or something else.
Okay.
So when we cook a potato or we cook grains, they become more digestible, and so we can get so much more nutrition out of them. These Facebook and Instagram accounts in particular, these people that are like the raw food vegan celebrities,
Yeah.
to get enough calories you have to eat something like 10 times the amount of food you normally would eat just to get enough calories. It is outrageous. So there are some people I've seen like where they'll show what they eat for breakfast, and it's like a whole watermelon and a pound of fruit on top just to barely get in enough calories. It's really hard to do. And the couple people in my life I've ever met who are raw food vegans don't exactly glow with health. Like you wouldn't look at them and say like, what are they doing? I want to do what they're doing. So it's really hard. Oftentimes, again, interestingly enough, the reason I see people go raw food vegan is it's almost like a form of political revolution. Like it is a rebellion against sort of status quo. It's almost has more of a political undertone to it, which hey is fine.
Right.
But if someone's going to go raw, it's really you got to really tiptoe that line well. It's much easier, I think, to eat a more cooked plant-based diet because you don't have to spend all day eating. You don't have to spend quite
Mhm.
so much time preparing food because it just gets so much more easily digested by the fact that you're cooking it.
Yeah, okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Because I've been stuck between, okay, should I not be cooking this? Should I be having
Hmm.
like more raw salads and things like that? But I like hot meals. I
Hmm.
really do. Every now and again, I like a salad, but I probably want to throw something hot on top of it.
Like, and I think it's, when you look at some of these raw food retreats, they're always in like Santa Fe, they're in Costa Rica, they're in hot parts of the world where it probably feels good to eat lots of salads and fruit, but
Yeah.
four-season climate, it's just not going to happen. Yeah, I just don't think it's
Right.
as satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah, when it's cold outside, I want soup, not salad.
Hmm.
Yeah. you know. Um, and so we talked a little bit about the groups, and one of the things I noticed in some of these vegan groups, even if it's a beginners group,
Hmm.
there are a lot of snobs, just rude vegans, and I'm like, shouldn't you be happier because you're eating like the earth?
Yeah.
Calm your spirits a little bit. And so it really deters some folk from trying to engage in a lifestyle.
Hmm.
And so I guess like as someone who's been doing this for 18 years, how do you deal with that? Do you check those people or do you try to, comfort the person who just got ripped apart in the group?
No, it really bums me out because it's hard enough to, yeah, I'll say it differently. It's really easy to eat a vegan diet. It's the world around us that makes it hard, right? It's what's
Mm,
available at restaurants. It's sort of the societal norm. So it's already stacked against you enough. And then people say, well, being vegan is elite. It's only for white people. It's only for wealthy people. And you want to say that's not true. But when you go to these groups and you see who's the people doing it, and it's a lot of 20-some-year-old white male bodybuilders that are like, look at how much muscle I have and I'm vegan.
mhm.
There's that aspect of it. And then there's a lot of people who, just to be fully honest, are doing it because they're like, is this trendy right now? And so I know that if I build a social media platform around this, I'll get 15,000 followers really quickly. And it's a shame that social media, you get more likes when you're controversial and when you're you're exclusionary and you're telling
Mhm.
people that they're doing stuff wrong. A lot of the times now when I do counseling for people, it's almost like recovery. Like there was one woman I just recently worked with who is not the first person who kind of escaped one of these Facebook groups where it's you only eat once a day and it's a salad and beans aren't good for you and potatoes make you fat and fruit has too much sugar and if you eat past 4 p.m. you're going to be fat and ugly your whole, I mean, honestly, like this really aggressive bullying, almost disordered eat. And like come say, well, is this true? Like, is it bad for me to eat bread? Is it bad for me to do these things? And so it's a
Right.
lot of re-education for people to know, like, please don't let these influencers scare you or distort what you think is healthy. It's very difficult because a lot of times they're not healthcare professionals,
Right.
and it's not that this information should only be coming from healthcare professionals, but it's a lot of it is just people who have really no background or education, even in just behavior change, giving a lot of very impassioned advice, and so people just kind of assume they know what they're talking about. So
Yeah.
the snobbery and the bullying in the plant-based community is one of the reasons we will continue to have difficulty being legitimized until we kind of check ourselves, I think, in this way.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's absolutely true. And I mean, another part, and you alluded to it when we were talking about like the muscle folk or whatever.
Hmm.
And I see a lot, and I know for me it gets discouraging because my weight loss journey has been like slow. It's been
Hmm.
like a little turtle walking around. Um, and so you see so many people with these transformative stories. They're like, I've been vegan a month, and look, and I'm like, I've been doing this for how many months, and woo, I'm down 5 pounds, And so,
Right.
I mean, if you're looking to lose weight, is
Hmm.
going plant based like the best thing to do? And what do you say to that person who's like me, like you're doing
Hmm.
it, and you're like, wow, like
Yeah.
this isn't happening for me the way it's happening for that
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing is to remember that like online social media and the internet is really good at lying.
person.
And so often what happens is again, going back to kind of, I think, the snobbery of it, they specifically hire models and they'll ask them to gain a little bit of weight, but through lighting and sticking your stomach out and bad makeup and angles makes them look like they're bigger than they are.
Okay.
Go back to doing what they were doing before, or they do a really unhealthy kind of crash diet, 500 calorie day thing, lose weight, and they're like, look what I did in a month. And now look how toned and ripped I am, because I was already toned and ripped because I was a model, but kind of just made myself not look as healthy, bad makeup, etc. I mean, there's even stuff out there about, with guys with abs, the makeup contouring that's done to make it look like their abs are, oh, yeah, absolutely. Or to make it look like they're way more defined than they really are.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know that. I get so discouraged and then I go eat ice cream and then I get up the next day and I feel bad about the fact that I ate ice cream. You just blew your whole day.
Oh, I know. If there's one thing I can get across, it's that food should be a source of pleasure. And there are just as many plant-based physicians, I think, that are giving bad advice out there about that. Just pinch your nose and swallow the greens, and food is about health. It's not about enjoyment. And so there's bad stuff coming from every direction, but food should always be a source of pleasure. It's where we get a lot of our pleasure hormones and chemicals from, is by eating. And so if I've got health goals to work towards, I got health goals to work toward, but I shouldn't have to sacrifice the enjoyment I'm getting from my food in the pursuit of those goals. Yeah. And oftentimes plant-based foods are naturally really enjoyable because they're full of carbohydrates, they're full of natural sugars, they get all of our happy chemicals going. So they really should be a source of good times. They should make us feel good.
Yeah, you give me a good piece of fruit and I'm set. That's all.
Totally.
That's all. In the summertime, just give me a fruit salad. I grew up that way, which is funny because in the summer, my mother had this thing about, I'm not cooking. It's too hot to cook for you all. So she would make like these huge like chef salads and, so we would get excited, like, oh, she's going to the deli, like she's getting a thick cut ham and cheese. And so we would get excited, or she'd make this enormous fruit salad, and that would be the meal. Mm-hmm. Now, when I talk to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, you're an older Black lady. I need you to do better. I need you to like incorporate more greens and things. She's like, that doesn't make sense. She's just throwing it out the window. So even when we talk to her about collard greens, which she hates, but we love, we're like, okay, well, can you make it this way? Because your daughter's trying to be vegan. Your son has a wife who's vegan. Can you fix this? And no, there's no way to make food without animal, right?
Right.
And I think that's kind of a mentality of a lot of Black folk, because we love our flavoring, we love seasonings and things like that, and we don't know how to substitute. So, I mean, how do you create these same traditional dishes that we would have, but make them healthier? Like, what do you do?
Absolutely. So, so few animal foods actually taste good by themselves. Like, if you just boiled plain chicken breast without anything else done to it, most people wouldn't look at that and say, oh, I'm so excited to eat that, right? Like or like if you just had like raw, unseasoned, like ground meat cooked, like I think, oh, like that's what you give to like a 5-year-old. Like nobody wants to eat that. Yeah. So it's usually like when I do this type of work with people, we'll say like, okay, like, so what do you love? And if it's like, oh, well, I'm putting, smoked meat into my greens to cook them. Well, is it because it's the meat, or is it that smokiness that you want? Like what is it that's really, are you craving? Because if it's smokiness, all right, well, you could put liquid smoke in the collard greens and you could cook it there and kind of give it that. Or you could buy the smoked tempeh bacon out there. That's just tempeh and other things that make it smoke and cook it in there. Or you could buy the smoked like plant-based like sausage or chorizo or something, and cook it in there. So it's giving you that smoky flavor, because really that's what you want, is that smoky flavor, whether it's actually, a ham hock or a neck or something in there that's smoked. It's sort of probably not the point. It's really the flavor you're trying to get from it.
Right. So there are things out there, if we just look beyond some of the basic seasonings that we're accustomed to, that give us that smoky flavor, those different things that we're seeking.
like I love smoked paprika, and I put that in anything that I want to have that flavor, because like that's what's in like barbecue potato chips is smoked paprika. Like that's what, so it's like if that's what I want, I can just buy the spice and put it in my kale or whatever, and that will give the flavor that's wanted. So it's not about abandoning the flavors. It's really like, okay, is it spicy? Is it sour? Is it salty? Like what is it that I'm craving? And then finding another option for it that would be able to go in.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. Because even as I start to dig deeper into this lifestyle, I'm like, well, what am I
Hmm.
like? How am I going to cook this? And so now I've purchased like liquid smoke. I've purchased not the soy sauce alternative. I can't think of what it is right
Oh,
now.
the like the liquid aminos or
Yeah, the liquid
yeah.
aminos, and like so they're sitting in my cabinet. And I have zero clue what to do with them, but I'm working on it. At least I have. I secured it, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that you talked about was like tempeh and the chorizo like alternative, and so
Hmm.
I wanted to dig into that because I
Yeah.
know for me, I've made it a point of not eating too many meat alternatives because that's like heavily. Some of them are heavily soy based,
Hmm.
and I don't. It just sounds like I shouldn't have that much soy. I don't actually know anything. I just told myself
Yeah.
that. So, can you talk a little bit about meat alternatives? Because I keep seeing all of these new vegan places open up, and everything they're offering is like it's a meat product. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't. That's not like a mushroom disguise. That's something
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So all right, so first with the soy. Yeah, there is a lot of messaging out there to stay away from soy. And so just there is absolutely no reason to avoid soy. Even if you are a person who has any kind of estrogen receptive positive form of cancer or other type of health condition or other sorts of hormonally driven conditions, soy foods do not contain estrogen. Soy
else.
foods contain compounds that the shape of them are similar to estrogen, but don't actually create the changes in our bodies the way that animal estrogen does. So the
Mhm.
number one source of estrogen in the diet is milk. Because how do you keep a cow lactating? You inject it with estrogen. And so animal foods are really a significant source of estrogens and other hormones or even hormone disruptors, whereas plants, because they're not animals, they don't create that same change in our bodies. For about 10 years, I was doing work with the Breast Cancer Resource Center of New Jersey in Princeton. And in 10 years, I don't think I had a single class where at least one person didn't say, but I heard I shouldn't eat soy. For people with breast cancer, actually eating soy is protective against it, even and protective against recurrence, even with ER positive form of cancers. And so if it's things like tofu and tempeh and soy milk and those sorts of things, um, there's no reason to avoid them for any kind of hormone concerns. If anything, diets that contain soy foods might actually help balance hormonal disruptions.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So I don't need to be having this every night, but it's
Mhm.
okay if I have it more than once a week.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like you would have to drink more than maybe a quart of soy milk a day every single day before you could possibly get into the realm where you're eating an excessive amount of soy. And even then, it really wouldn't be the estrogen. It would be because soy is so high in protein that it would actually just be from getting almost a little too much protein in the diet that way.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
so yeah, with those sorts of things, like if you're like, oh, I want to cook up my, normally I'd cook bacon on Sunday, so I'm going to do the tempeh bacon, or normally I'd roast this in the oven, so I'm going to roast a block of tofu in the oven. That is like what I sometimes say is like normal culinary, just like what you put in a recipe is
Yeah.
all good. Now with the meat alternatives, like the I can't believe it's not beef and those sorts of things,
Mhm.
it kind of depends on what you're looking for. I think they're really helpful as transitional foods. Like when I was going vegan, like the soy ice creams and the plant-based burgers, which were not nearly as good as they are now, but like
Right.
they were just similar enough to kind of help me keep
Yeah.
going, and then eventually lost even a really strong desire for those. So I think they can be really helpful. Like, so if, for example, like if it's like, mom, will you cook it with this instead of this? Like you'll almost not be able to tell the difference. I think it helps kind of people get on board to be like, okay, this food isn't bad, or this doesn't taste weird or something like that.
Okay.
If you're looking at it as a processed food, where it's a potentially big source of salt or a big source of added fat, then just like any other processed food, I think they need to be treated with some caution.
Yeah.
But they don't contain the types of protein that's in animal food. They don't contain the hormones. They don't contain the other stuff. So I think there's still a healthier option. But
Okay.
I know a lot of people that live off of, processed vegan mac and cheese and processed drumsticks and,
Yeah.
ice cream and stuff. And like, well, that you're still eating drumsticks and ice cream and mac and cheese every day. That's still not a healthy choice. But hey, if it's at least one step closer to a little less meat, a little more plants, it's if you can do that for a couple of weeks or a month or two to just get you going, then okay,
Yeah.
it's gonna be all right.
All right. And so thinking about, because I now and I've been called like a snob in one of my groups because I shop a lot at Whole Foods now. That just seems to be the place where I'm comfortable to get my fruits and vegetables. But every now and again, I don't feel like going through the process of taking the dried chickpea, rehydrating it. It's a lot when I just want to eat. So I keep like canned black beans and chickpeas around. But then you also hear like you shouldn't be utilizing canned foods while you're trying to live this plant-based lifestyle. Like, what do you say to people who talk regularly about
Right. So I got a whole drawer full of canned beans, so don't worry about it. So when it comes to fruits and veggies, definitely don't do canned. Frozen is just as good as fresh. Sometimes it's even better if you're getting it out of season.
Okay.
And then with canned beans, yeah, same thing. I don't always want to boil all my stuff from dried, and so I have canned. I do try to get BPA free when I can, because there definitely is a lot of mounting concern that the BPA in some of these cans can be a hormone disruptor and an endocrine disruptor. So I try to buy the brands that have BPA free lining for the canned beans and those sorts of things.
Okay.
And then the other thing is if you're draining them and rinsing them well, any sodium that's in there, they don't put salt in there really to flavor the beans. It's really to keep them from disintegrating during the canning process.
Okay.
So it doesn't actually get absorbed into them. So if you're trying to watch your salt, as long as you're draining the liquid away and really rinsing it good, you're getting rid of most of that salt.
Okay. So that's good to know. Now I can look at BPA free because I'm like, what's on sale? Got it.
Same thing. I mean, absolutely. But if you're able to find a brand, and more brands are doing BPA free because of the demand, when you can do it, it's a nice thing. But are you familiar with something called the Blue Zones? I can't remember if we've talked about this before or not.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So Blue Zones is a study that came out of National Geographic, and it looks at these populations of people around the world that are living to be like 100, over 100, and they're thriving.
Okay.
And so they call these blue zones, and the whole question, so what are they doing that the rest of us aren't, that's maybe contributing to their long life? And sure enough, they mostly eat vegan, or at least mostly vegan diets.
Okay.
But the guy that runs it, Dan Buettner, I really like this comment he makes is, for them, they're not so much making the healthy choice as they're making the convenient choice. Like, this is just their life. Like, this is the way they eat, and this is the way they move, and this is the way they have family. So for them, this is just how they've always lived life. And so they're not seeking health, it's just there. And so what I've always kind of taken from that is we've got to make sure our own choices are convenient. So if dried beans are technically, well, then there's no BPA and no added salt. True, but if it's more likely I'm going to stop eating plant-based because I'm sick to death of soaking and boiling these beans, I'm just going to go back to my, Chick-fil-A because that's easier.
Yeah.
Then the canned beans are definitely going to be a good thing if they help this be the convenient choice that just also so happens to be a healthier choice.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good to know. I mean, would you say with all this talk we just had about canned beans, dry beans, alternative meat, etc., is being vegan affordable?
Yeah, if you do it well, it's really affordable. And I think, again, goes back to the kind of the snob aspect of it, or the elitism aspect of it, of, eating vegan for so many cultures is like the peasant food. Like, this is the non-affluent food. And so that potatoes are cheap. Beans, especially if you buy them dry, but even canned beans are like 80 cents a can. So like they're pretty affordable. You can get huge bags of rice, especially if money is something that, you're watching. If you don't go to a specialty store, like I just went to this store that I just discovered that is like a mixture of Indian, Latin American, and Jamaican. And I got
Ooh,
this huge bag of dried beans, and I was like, this is evil how cheap this bag of dried beans is.
right.
And same thing, like huge tubs of even brown rice that were dirt cheap. So if you're thinking about like, well, what types of stores can I, patron to, where am I going? You can buy dried grains, dried beans that are really inexpensive. And then staple crops like sweet potatoes and white potatoes and roots and tubers are really inexpensive. Kale's great. But if you don't want kale, or they only have the expensive organic kale, screw the kale and buy a green that's cheaper. Buy spinach then, or buy
Yeah.
collards, or buy mustard greens, or something that's cheaper. And you keep it affordable. It doesn't have to always be, oh, this was the heirloom rice that was flown in from this one particular, rice
Yeah.
paddy in Maine or something like that, where they have this. Like, it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I know I said I shop a lot at Whole Foods,
Hmm.
and I really made the complete switch to Whole Foods once the pandemic hit, just because of, they just had for me, they just had more of a function that made sense and made me feel safe, going grocery shopping. But before that, I did a lot at the farmers market, the indoor
Hmm.
farmers market, and I would have a cart full of items and maybe $30, but I had
Oh,
bags and
absolutely.
bags of greens and fruits, and vegetables
Yeah.
and nuts, that
Yeah.
that
Right.
worked.
and it
Yeah.
and it shows again just the various ways this pandemic hits people disproportionately. That, well, all right, the indoors farmers markets get shut down, I guess I got to go to the Trader Joe's or the Whole Foods, and for so many people that's not an option, and so you
Yeah.
further stratify people and just keep seeing how they're just socially, just disadvantaged in so many of these ways when it comes to health.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I even think about like my hometown. So I grew up in Bridgeton, and I went to high school in Vineland.
Okay.
And I remember like coming back down and I was like, oh, I'll just stop at the Whole Foods, me and my privilege right now, right? I'll just stop at the Whole Foods and grab something while I'm there. And I'm like, there's no Whole Foods down here. And so I started to think about like the population that's a large African American, Latinx populations, and so they don't have this access. I'm not saying that like my people are, because I know how y'all gonna talk when y'all listen to this and think I'm a snob. So let me clear this up. I'm not saying my people ain't got stuff. I'm just saying that not every company finds our hometowns valuable to place their stores in. And so
Absolutely.
then our access becomes slim pickings, right? And
Yeah.
so, and if and it's like, so what do you do, especially if you don't have the ability to run over to like however many towns? I think the closest Whole Foods when I checked it out was like 30 miles out. I was like, who's doing that for
Yeah,
groceries, right?
exactly.
So like,
Hmm.
what would you suggest for someone who, I'm not going to say a food desert because I think that's an exaggeration, but for people who don't have that kind of access, like someone
Yeah.
like ourselves would.
Absolutely. I would say to always scope out what's already in your store that you just may not know, because when you're not looking for something, you're not looking for it. Like if you've never thought about trying beans, then you're probably not paying much attention to see at least what variety of beans are in your store or in your corner store, wherever you're shopping on your normal shops, just because that's not on your list. And so even just to almost like go to where you already shop and kind of just look at it as fresh eyed as you can, to be like, okay, well, what is in the produce section? What does look good? What sorts of frozen fruits and veggies do they have? And what are the most affordable ones? If they don't have brown rice, oh, well, they at least have white rice and it's still a grain. Like maybe it's a little more processed, but it's still a grain.
Right.
And to try to see at least what you can do. And if you can't build a full meal on that, then just do as much on that as you can and just see how much of the meat or the cheese or whatever you can decrease and still enjoy your meal, and just start there.
Okay.
Because what I find is once people start to even a little bit decrease their intake of some of these foods and their taste buds start to change a little bit, they just start to notice how it's really the other, it's the seasoning that's going into it that they crave, not so much what that seasoning is going on. And so a big plate of rice and vegetables, which may not look like a traditional Western idea of what a meal is still a complete, healthy, nourishing dish. And if someone's like, look, I'm not putting chickpeas in there, but I'll put half as much chicken and twice as much carrot as I usually do, that's still moving in a more plant-based direction. And you just kind of see how you feel with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and we've talked about this type of stuff in class, but I think a lot of the research that came out connected to COVID and talking about how African American, Black African Americans were, predisposed to this because of generational health issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of access and funding and things like that. And so I recognize for me that changing my lifestyle probably put me in a better position to not get COVID, aside from just inside, which my introvert self doesn't mind. But if I'm trying to convince my friends that they got to give it a go, just to give themselves a fighting chance. Like how do I convince them to even start?
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like?
Absolutely. I mean, I know. I mean, so yeah, you take COVID, and one of the biggest risk factors for COVID right now, like in terms of a poor outcome, is diabetes.
Okay.
And there's a lot that's coming out too with hypertension. And we know that these are two conditions that absolutely disproportionately hit Black communities way more than white communities. And same thing with Latinx communities, way more than white communities. Mm-hmm. Well, these are two conditions that are almost entirely due to diet and lifestyle. Like almost entire, like 90, I think it's about 90% of our risk for type 2 diabetes is what we eat. Oh. So like before we even bring in, tobacco and exercise and all those things. And so it's, if you have a family history or you're worried about getting COVID and you're pre-diabetic or you're type 2 diabetic and you want to actually get rid of this thing, or at least as much as you can, like this isn't just, oh, well, it'd be nice to eat more vegan, wouldn't it? Because it sounds healthy. Like this will really get down into your cells. Like this gets down into what is causing so many of these chronic diseases to come into place. And it's the decades and decades of research that has shown how lifestyle focused these conditions are is crazy. And how so many people just aren't told this. Even their healthcare professionals aren't told this. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but like, do it for your own health. Like, it's not about joining some cause. Like, you don't have to go to any animal rights rallies if that's not what you're interested in. Maybe you will one day, who knows? But like, it's not about adopting, well, to be vegan means I have to now be this, which means I have to not use leather and I have to, go to all these things and I have to subscribe to PETA and all. Like, you do those if you want, but that has nothing to do with what's going on your plate. Like, just to say, well, if I'm worried about getting COVID, just by getting rid of one food or substituting out one food for a plant option, what that does for my type 2 diabetes risk, my weight management, my hypertension. So then even if I do contract it, my risk of poor outcomes is lower because I'm already doing these things that are so protective. It's staggering. Vitamin C and B vitamins are being looked at right now, along with vitamin D, as a really important determining factor that if you do get COVID, how serious your case is. Okay. And vitamin C and B vitamins are almost exclusively found in plant foods. Vitamin C in particular is only found in plant foods. So these very small things that you can do so much as we're continuing to go through this pandemic. And especially if you're a member of a community that's already has the deck stacked against them when it comes to this, every little bite of food change makes a huge difference.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I remember, I think I started when I became interested in just changing. I would have like meatless Monday and starting that way. It's interesting. I went out to dinner with a friend, like my first time, like actually being out at a restaurant in the middle of this. And I was totally freaking out. But
I know.
Had to keep like a strong face on, like, I'm not scared. But literally brought my water bottle in, like, no, I don't need your glass or your straw. But we're eating and I'm like, yeah, I'll have this salad. And, I say I'm veganish because every now and again I have a piece of chicken, right? And I'm going to say there's nothing wrong with that. But I watched him eat and it was all meat.
Oh yeah.
And so I offered him my stuffed peppers because they had rice and chickpeas and things like that. I was like, well, let me try this because you need like at least one vegetable. And so I think about like, what are your arteries look like?
Yeah.
And if you just change one day a week, can that actually change what's happening inside your body?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even one meal. I mean, it's been shown that if you're saying, look, I'm not giving up anything, all right, can you at least load up with as many veggies with that meal as you can? Because it's been shown if you eat like a burger, but you eat it with avocado and spinach and arugula and a side salad, the inflammation in your arteries is less than if you ate it by itself.
Okay.
So like at least start to eat more veggies. Like at least start to not think fruit has too many carbs in it or something like that. Like at least start to load up on these things and start to think about how much of your day is already pretty vegan. Like if you really write everything down you eat, we naturally eat a lot of plants to begin with. It's this weird mentality of I don't know what, but like how cool it is to have a plate with just meat on it or something. Like same thing. We went out with a friend for dinner a couple of weeks ago, and he got fajitas double meat and didn't eat the peppers or the onions or the mushrooms. I wanted to look at him and be like, honey, like why? Like, is this like is this for a reality show? Like, who are you trying to prove something to? Like, you
Right.
couldn't even eat the peppers with it. It's so crazy. And I know when you're young, and if you're not showing any other symptoms, like you just assume things are good, and you don't realize how your arteries are just starting to get clogged with this stuff, and your blood flow is getting down. Number one cause of what, like workplace loss of productivity, disabilities, low back pain.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that is because our arteries in our back are full of fat and we can't get blood into our spine.
Oh, wow.
I know. So, like, even if you just suffer from low back pain, what getting some of this crap out of your diet will do just to get more blood flow to your vertebrae and how much better you'll feel from that.
Oh, well, like I knew that it was doing something, right? Like preventing
Mm-hmm.
heart attacks, but that's a lot of great information. I had no clue.
Yeah,
So I'm kind of happy
absolutely.
that I'm on this
Yeah.
journey. Like I started scanning my body and like, okay, do I have any pain? And have I felt pain? And is it gone? And so that's really
Yeah.
good to know that just by either doubling up your veggies as opposed to your meat or changing
Yeah.
one meal a day can really change your life. And
Yeah.
when I called this episode, "You Are What You Eat," like you really are. If you're eating shitty, then your body is probably
That's what's
shitty. The food
right.
that
Like,
you
why
eat.
would you be surprised? And so it's like, and again, not to keep harping on this, but that's what I can't stand about the social media influencers with this stuff is, yeah, they're all like 24 years old. Like, show me what they look like in 20 years.
Right.
It's going to be different. Like, it's this fascinating psychology of it's a bunch of young people. Again, it's a lot of white men. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, look what I do when basically they could do almost anything and pretty much look the way they do.
Yeah.
And people make lifestyle choices on it, but then as soon as they start to either age and stop doing it, in which case they get replaced, or their health gets bad, they get replaced by the next rung of next young social media influencers, and it just kind of keeps this thing going of, well, I only eat acai and goji berries and that's my whole diet and look how young I look. Like, well, yeah, you're 24 years old, you're gonna look like you're 24. My god, like there's 24-year-olds out there doing keg stand, they look 24. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like you're not fooling anybody, but it's this message out there that it's expensive, and there are some people, and I'm sure they're nice people, but they drive me crazy because their whole empire is built on expensive food, unaccessible food, food that is totally wiped of its original cultural identity and been co-opted. Like turmeric, right, is Southeast Asian, and you can go to all of these coffee shops and get, golden milk, and you get, or they'll call it moon milk, or they'll take all the India out of it, but they'll capitalize on its popularity because they know people will buy it, and it's like, well, no, like you didn't discover this, you didn't find this. This is part of global cuisine and culture and medicine for
Right.
way longer than you've been around with your Instagram account. So, like, it can
Right.
be just a simple thing of just making it work for yourself.
Yeah. Like I laughed when you said the acai bowls because I had my first acai bowl and after that, it was like all downhill. Like that was it. Like that's all I talked about, right? So I'm like, I
Yeah.
became like that snob. Like, I'm sorry, you don't have the, Stephanie, get over yourself. But then I started reading like the label, right, and
Hmm.
learning about where acai came from, and I'm like, I'm not sure this is going back.
Yeah.
People who are actually, out here growing
Hmm.
and harvesting this, and we're over here taking it for granted. And I think a lot of those things have been co-opted by white folks
Hmm.
for money, and then the people who have done all the hard work and have benefited from it. Now we don't have those resources because um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
sucks.
know. And so it's a hard thing because people want to be healthy, and that's a wonderful thing.
Mhm.
But it's, so what do you do? Do you buy the acai, which is overpriced? That's not helping the company. I'm sorry, that's not helping the people that are actually making this food. It's helping the company. Or do you not eat it? But in which case it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with it. But then people go crazy and say, well, then I'm just not going to change anything because it's too complicated. And so people get frozen, and there is a lot of, food is weird, right? Food is so interesting. Like there's a lot packed into food. It's not just what we eat. It's emotion, and it's history, and it's politics. Like there's so much in food. It's a weird, fascinating little part of our life.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the things that I really love about you is that you really try to walk people on this journey. And you actually have a Facebook group, right?
Yes.
And there's like monthly meetings, I think, right? Like I attend whenever you remind me. And so can you just talk a little bit about like how that came about, how long you've been doing that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, so a lot of this started again with Centristate doing this week. Oh God, I can't talk. Doing this 10-week program every summer, this plant powered program.
Okay.
But then part of it was, well, what am I talking to people about in between? So we created like a private Facebook group just for people that have done that. But then around the same time, I was thinking, like, I think I'm wrapping up my time at this particular hospital. I got connected to something called the Plant Based Nutrition Support Group, which is based out of Detroit.
Okay.
And it's this massive, incredible organization that does all this education about plant-based nutrition. And I started to get connected and be friends with the guy that founded it. And he said, we're really trying to move beyond Detroit and go national. I was like, well, let's do a chapter in New Jersey. And so we changed, basically all I did was change the name of the private group for this hospital group to, if you still want to be a part of this, we're going to be now part of this national organization's just title, so other people can find us. And it kind of just naturally morphed into that way. And then right before our first meeting, coronavirus happened. So we're like, so it's just been on Zoom from day one, and that seems to actually be working out really well. So I think we're just going to kind of be doing this for a while now.
Yeah.
And it's just a monthly check-in for people, regardless of whether this is their first day being vegan, they're still not vegan, they've been vegan for 50 years, and it's just a very informal come in, how's everyone doing? Share your successes, share your questions, share resources, stuff that's coming up in the world. And it's just a very informal thing. It's not about saying, all right, Stephanie, you have to be completely vegan by the next time you come in, or
Yeah.
you have to lose so much weight, or it's not clinical or anything. It's just people who are interested to say, hey, I made this awesome chili and here's what I put in it, or I made this chili and it was awful. What did I do wrong? And just to kind
Right.
of figure it out from there.
Yeah.
And since now we get to be connected with PBNSG, that other people, whether they're even in New Jersey or not, since we're online, can pop in and join if they want.
Yeah. Yeah. And just name the Facebook group in case someone wants to pop in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can find it's totally public. It's Jersey Shore Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, JSPBNSJ.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it says Jersey Shore. It's not just for folks at the shore. I live nowhere near the shore, and I'm a part of it. In the meeting, my first meeting, I learned so much and got really excited. I was surprised that I took notes. I didn't expect to, and I'm like scrambling around trying to take notes, writing on everything. So it's really informative. It's probably one of the safer spaces to talk about trying to be vegan, your successes and failures as vegan. So thank you for taking that on and creating that space, because I think it's needed for so many of us. And so people look it up, join the group. Anthony, he rocks the session. He actually cares about like your time. He values your time.
No, and we attract the nicest people. Like everyone's supportive.
Yes.
There's no body shaming or there's no one-upsmanship or anything like that. Like it is a good, and I'm glad that you found it to be a safe space, because that's what I want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely was. So I would definitely urge anyone who's either already on the journey, has been considering the journey, jump in. You'll learn a lot and you'll make some great connections. So that's what has been for me a really great learning experience.
Excellent.
On a funny note, before we wrap up, we were joking before we started the session about vegan wine.
Yeah.
So I'm vegan-ish because every now and again I slip, but I poured my wine and I saw something posted about vegan wine. I was like, I guess I'm never gonna be vegan, because I just figured that wine is grapes, so I'm good. It's a fruit serving. What the heck is up with this vegan wine stuff?
Yeah. Okay. So again, it comes down to what your definition is for yourself of vegan and all this stuff. But the reason why there's some wine that's actually classified as vegan is when wine goes through the clarification process, like when they get all the sediment and stuff, there's different, I think they're called finning. I think the process is called finning. So they're finning agents, but they use different things to bind up all the sediments and impurities. And so those can be casein, which is a protein that's found in milk. They can be albumin, which is often found in egg whites, or it can be gelatin, which is made from the connective tissue of animal, joints and those sorts of things. And then I can't remember what it's called, but there's actually a protein made out of like fish or the bladder of fish that's sometimes used for it as well. So it's not like if you're drinking wine, you're like, I didn't know there was that much milk in wine or something like that. Like it's not. But if you're like, hey, I'm really trying to avoid anything that has animal byproducts or filtering agents, that's why. Like technically, there's even vegan sugar compared to non-vegan sugar, because there's in the whitening process for white sugar, there's actually something from animal bone that's often used to whiten it.
Oh.
Yeah, so again, which, hey, for a lot of people, it's a reason to eat less sugar.
Right.
But like,
over the sugar in the raw, I thought that was better.
Yeah, so like less processed sugars, or again, there's even granulated sugar that says it's vegan. If you're like, wait, I didn't think there was any animals in sugarcane or beets or something like that, but they do use animal byproducts in like the whitening process of it. So same thing with beer. Some beer is vegan, some of it has fish protein, other things used. So there are websites out there that will list these brands. Hard alcohol is always vegan because the distilling process doesn't use any. Super good there. So basically what I'm saying is hard liquor is super healthy and you have nothing to worry about.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but if that is something you're looking for, you can definitely look up. There's all sorts of databases and things out there that will tell you brands and like even brands within brands of like whether or not they use animal products or not.
Okay. Wow, I always learn so much from you when we talk. And
we got
I love
good conversations.
Yes. Looking forward to the upcoming conversations we'll start to have once classes start again. So yeah, that's going to be fun. But Anthony, again, I just want to thank you for sitting and having this conversation with me. It's not my goal to turn everybody in the world vegan or vegan-ish, but I really would love to see more people put better things in their body, so that they are healthier, and especially thinking about all the different diseases that are attacking our bodies, like knowing that if we change what we eat, we change inside and out.
Absolutely.
So it's not about like if you have the ripped abs, it's about how does your body feel internally? Are you sluggish? What's happening for you? Having breathing issues? What's going on? And so that's my goal. I want people to be healthy, at least the people in the world that I like. You know?
Let's keep them around.
Right, we'll keep them around.
No, it's exactly. Like it's just even if your goal is just to sleep better, like eating healthier helps with that, or your goal is to not ache by the end of the day. Eating healthier helps with that. So like it's not about looks and it's not about all these things. Like it can be something as simple as I don't want my shoulders to be so tight anymore. Like it helps. It really helps.
And that just made me think about fasting. So
Yeah.
I've been doing a combination of like vegan, working out, and some fasting. I've tried some of like the fad stuff, like I do juicing every now and again. Are these types of things good for you, healthy? Should we try them?
Yeah. It's hard. It's tricky. Fasting, especially things like intermittent fasting and like the more prolonged fasts, they're definitely being researched right now. And the stuff that is coming out with it is really interesting. Be aware most of the research out there is on mice and on like single-celled organisms like yeast.
Mm,
So what that means is cool things are being found, but it's a far cry to say therefore this absolutely will do the same thing in humans.
gotcha.
Um, so maybe in another 5, 10 years, we'll see, like maybe we'll have more information on whether you really can significantly extend your lifespan with a 16-hour fast every day or a 1 day a week full. Like we'll see. But just to know that a lot of the claims that are being made out there, again, not to keep, I love social media, by the way. I'm not anti-social media, but but it's funny how all of a sudden everybody overnight becomes intermittent fasting experts. Like it's just all
Yeah.
of a sudden one day everyone was talking about this thing that they clearly don't know anything about. So I'm a big fan of digestive rest. That's the way I like to think of it. So, and there's definitely studies that show that if you don't eat right before bed, you sleep better. If you give yourself a couple hours, like maybe 12 or more hours between your last meal of the night and your first meal the next day, that helps with bacteria growth, healthy bacteria growth in your gut. So there's
Yeah.
definitely some good things to it. Um, whether and the fasting has not been shown, like the intermittent fasting and things hasn't been shown to be better than other forms of efforts to lower your calories when it comes to weight loss.
Okay.
So it's but it can be if it works for you. Like some people do really well on some of these programs, but if you're doing like this 16-hour fast every day and you hate it, don't keep doing it. Like it's
Okay.
there's other things you can do that can be just as helpful. Juice fast I think can be helpful, especially to like clear your taste buds. Like if you're a real like I can't stop eating my candy and my processed foods. Juice fast can really help kind of reset your taste buds and things and kind of help. Just don't do them for too long because you need that fiber to keep the bacteria in your gut healthy.
Okay. So
But yeah,
I tend to do them either like 3 to 5 days, and if I do 5 days, I'll do like five juices in one meal. Is
yeah,
that appropriate?
absolutely. I mean, again, they can be, and there's actually a really cool center in Yeah, I think they're in California, right? Well, they're on the West Coast called True North, and they do a lot of like supervised water fasting and other sorts of things. Oh yeah, I mean, it's a whole thing. And there's some pretty cool research out there about water only fasting that is medically supervised. Um,
Okay.
but like same thing, like for some people that may not be either possible or healthy, or just available. But yeah, a couple days of like a one meal with fruit and vegetable juices just as a way to start to slowly like, oh yeah, like fruits and veggies do taste good and I don't have to eat my weight in popcorn and potato chips right now. Like it
Yeah.
can be a way to get closer to it. Some people get a little obsessive with it and they start to get like, again, like the raw food vegans, they get undernourished.
Okay.
But yeah, 2, 3, 4 days, 5 days, alternate meals, those sorts of things. I think they can be helpful to just kind of get our brains and our taste buds in a different direction. And I think for a lot of people, there's just something like cool about like, I look what I did. And like, there's that sense of accomplishment. And it makes you more excited about wanting to do these things for ourselves that are healthy because of like, there's like a trial, like a very moderate, but there was something like to overcome. And for some people, I think that really works well with their minds.
Yeah. 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 I love when I do the fasting. I think
Hmm.
it gets me back in tune with my body, my goals.
Yeah.
I do a complete reset, physical, mental, emotional reset. So
And then it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So that can be an awesome thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I
Um,
love it. I try to do one like a fast once a month just to kind of get my life together.
yeah.
So September is coming
It's
up.
good.
So if people wanted to touch base with you to maybe get in touch with your services, how would they go about reaching you? I know you have a website, so
Yes, absolutely. My little rinky website. So it's just my full name. It's anthonydisson.com.
okay,
everything I do, especially with programs, there's nothing up there now, of course, because of COVID, but as things start to, hopefully, we'll see what the future brings us, but anything I'm doing like community ed programs or workshops or things, I'll post there.
Okay.
I have a contact me there if people want to reach out, even with just like, if it's just like a question, reach out. I love just answering general email questions. It doesn't even have to be anything formal, but if you just go to anthonydisson.com, you can get all my contact stuff there. If you want to join the Jersey Shore Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group page, especially if you can't find it on Facebook, contact me through the website. I'll send you the link there, and get us all as healthy as any of us can be.
All right, I love it. I love it.
And then just a real quick, the last thing I want to share is, because we didn't get a chance to talk about it too much because it's a whole thing in of it itself. But if anyone wants to learn more about like the racism aspects of the U.S. dietary guidelines and how heavy it is on meat and milk and like the racial implications of that, there's an incredible physician, Dr. Milton Mills, who writes and lectures so passionately and eloquently about this. So if anyone wants to think about this, even just the fact that the U.S. dietary guidelines recommends milk, how insanely racist that is when 75% of most people are lactose intolerant to begin with. He's got so much to say. So even just to look into that aspect of it, Dr. Milton Mills is incredible.
Oh man, now I'm like so curious. Like we might have to do a part 2.
There's so much to say about it. Yeah. Okay. I heard him speak at a conference last summer or 2 summers ago. I can't remember. And he blew me away. He was the best speaker I've ever heard talk about this. So I know, well, if we want to do a part 2, we'll do a part 2, but
we're doing a part 2.
Okay. In the meantime, go straight to the master, go to Milton Mills. He is incredible. And there's so much there to say.
Okay. So you heard it here. We're going to do a part 2, You Are What You Eat, because we're going to dig into the racism aspect of all of the food, right? And then
there's a lot.
Do some more clicking. So in the meantime, before we get to part 2, you all to work on this diet, right? Like I want you to stay around. So let's get some more fruits and vegetables in there. Eat some lettuce.
We got it. Absolutely.
Food is good for you. Fresh or frozen. So, I hope that you all were able to take something from this. And, like I said, one meal, one day at a time. Let's change our food lifestyles and our relationship with food so that we can change our relationship with our health and we can, live a long, prosperous life. Because if we're dying from these health conditions, then who's going to be around to continue to fight for justice, right? We're all going to be dead.
Exactly.
So let's make it happen. Anthony will be back so we can talk about food and racism. And thank you again for hanging out with us for another episode of Maybe I'm Rambling. We'll see you next week.